Welcome back to BelAhdan, the show that brings the other voice of Arab American to your living room. Arab and Muslim Americans community all over the world now, they've been kind of really frightened and worried about since the bombing of the subway in London. And the issue of security now jumping in the headlines. And we're going to talk about the Patriot Act and the security here and how the events in London and what's going on in Iraq affecting the security here in this country, and what are the measurements. Are we better off than a year ago or 2 years ago? We have the U.S. Attorney Tom Heffelfinger is coming and kind enough to come and spend some time with us and talk a little bit about security and the Arab Americans and Arab American concern. Next to him we have Fawzi Salisi. He's a Middle Eastern researcher, and he also lived in London. Maybe we'd be interested to see his perspective on Arab Americans and how they feel in the context for on terrorism. Welcome to BelAhdan, Tom, and very nice of you to come to her. It's been a while since you were here, so are we safer than a year ago? And then we talked about the Patriot Act and some of the measurement that you guys, your department took since 9/11.
We are safer than we were a year ago. We will never be completely and absolutely safe. We're safer because the resources we have in place, like law enforcement and fire departments and first responders, work together better than they ever have, communicate better than they ever have. We share intelligence better than we ever have. On the other hand, we're an open and free society. We want to protect this as an open and free society. And that balance means that we can be secure but never completely secure.
Tell us a little bit, let's visit the Patriot Act, right, 9/11. Tell us, why was it necessary, and how did it do? Did it help to provide that security that you talked about?
What we learned after 9/11 is that terrorists were using state-of-the-art communication equipment, for example. And we also learned that the law that was available to federal and state law enforcement was written when the only way to communicate was with a rotary dial phone. And so the Patriot Act, among other things, gave us technological neutrality, which gave us the ability to legally move into an investigative model using investigative tools that are the state-of-the-art. We also found that we needed to expand the resources available for gathering intelligence that would be similar to or identical to the kind of tools we had available to investigate bank robberies and drug dealers. And that's also what the Patriot Act did. It gave us the technological tools and the legal tools to do the same thing in a terrorism investigation that we did when we were doing investigations of drug dealers. The key thing about the Patriot Act that most people don't recognize is that any one of the tools in that bill requires the approval of a judge. It's either a judge sitting here in Minnesota or a judge sitting in Washington, D.C., but it's still a judge.
So there is an oversight over what your department is doing?
Absolutely, absolutely. If we need what's called a security warrant, a FISA warrant, we have to go to a judge to get authority to do that.
So if you want to find out what somebody's reading or somebody is listening to or traveling or whatever phone conversation is doing, you need to have a judge oversight.
Yes.
So why in a debate a couple of weeks ago or months ago about the university, how we're either gonna renew the Patriot Act or we're gonna change, so how did that go?
Well, that debate's actually going on right now. There is, I believe in Congress this week, maybe it was last, there was debate on this. I know that the Senate has it on the schedule to debate next week, both in the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. We believe that the Patriot Act will pass, but we think it's very, very important for not only the general public, but for the congressmen and the senators to also be reminded that all of these provisions require judicial oversight, and that all of these provisions do nothing more than create the same tools for a terrorism investigation that we would use for other kind of
Why the public is not aware of that particular, which it seems to me, a come of needed for law enforcement to have, that they've been using with, as you said, drug dealers and.
Ahmed, let me ask you a question. How quickly do you think it takes to get a bill through Congress?
But the public themselves, even,
right,
you know, have...
Here's the point. The Patriot Act passed through Congress in about 2 months. That's unheard of. Usually, to get a bill, especially a complex bill like this through Congress, is months, if not years of debate. But Congress said, no, we need these tools and we need them now. This is right after 9/11. And when you don't have a congressional debate, you don't have the media coverage, and you don't have the public debate.
I see what you mean.
So the speed with which the original Patriot Act passed really denied the public the opportunity to debate and to learn about the provisions of the bill. Right. And so now we're having that debate, and it is really an education process of the public learning that these tools are not, they don't violate people's civil rights. There is judicial oversight, and they provide a comparable level of authority in both criminal cases and terrorism intelligence cases.
As you probably know by now, the Muslim Americans and Arab Americans very, you know, apprehended and very kind of weary and confused about all this. What's your department doing to assure them and to educate them about your activities and the fact this are citizen and liberty and a lot of issues that is given to them like anybody else?
Well, the Muslim American community in Minnesota is a vibrant and essential part of our community. And ever since 9/11 in particular, for the last 4 years, people like me and the mayors and the police chiefs and the FBI have really worked hard to try to reach out to those communities in any forum that is available to answer questions, to explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we do it. We're trying to be, to use a word that seems to be in vogue, we're trying to be transparent about how we're implementing the power we have available, how we are trying to protect the community, and how we're trying to protect the civil rights of all Americans, but Arab Americans in particular. One thing you may not be aware of, the Patriot Act, it's called a preamble. It's the introductory clause to the Patriot Act. It was written by Congress when they passed the Patriot Act. And in the preamble to the Patriot Act, it says that we must implement these authorities in a way designed to protect the civil liberties of Muslim Americans, specifically cites Muslim Americans in the Patriot Act. And the Patriot Act actually adds 3 provisions designed to make it easier to ensure that the civil liberties of all Americans, including Muslim Americans, are protected. So it is, a lot of this stuff doesn't get talked about in the media.
But when you single Muslim American in a law like that, I know that if this makes me more secure, or why being singled out to be assured.
But you got to remember, this was done in the this was done within 2 months of 9/11.
Yes.
And the 19 terrorists, I'm afraid, all came from Arab states.
Yeah.
And so the law says to protect the preamble of all Americans, including Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, Southeast Asian Americans.
Okay. Fawzi, I know America is a country of immigrants, and you know, it seems like Muslim American should really have an easier time for blending in and assimilate than in Europe. You know, it seems like Muslim Americans still have difficulties, and some might say, you know, that what happened in London last week really cannot happen here because, you know, it's just Muslim American really are not making it there in Europe, or especially in